The fleet dropped out of fold space at the edge of the system, and for 3 full seconds, every sensor on Commander Sorathe Ewan's flagship screamed. Not silence, not the dead hum of an empty star system. Noise. Sorathe stood at the center of her command deck, all 8 limbs locked against the floor in what her species called the posture of attention. Around her, the bridge crew of the Vashan Corps, each one a veteran of centuries, each one bored out of their minds by this assignment, went very still. "Quillen," Sorathe said. Her voice was flat. It was always flat. Emotions were a luxury she had stopped affording several thousand years ago. "Explain the sensor output." Quillen, her science officer, was already bent over her instruments. She was young by VN standards, only 800. Her lower mandibles were clicking in a rapid pattern that meant she was either fascinated or terrified, and at the moment, Sorathe could not tell which. "Electromagnetic saturation across all monitored frequencies," Quillen said. "Radio, microwave, terahertz, laser pulse, graviton ripple, the entire system is broadcasting." "From what source?" "The 3rd planet, its moon, the 4th planet, 2 moons of the 5th planet, the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets, and—" She stopped. "And? There is a structure in the outer system, beyond the ice belt. It is approximately 1 light minute across." Sorathe's mandibles clicked once, a small dry sound. Among the Ven, it meant something close to what a human might express by closing their eyes and whispering a prayer to a god they did not believe in. "Show me the 3rd planet," she said. Stars dissolved. A blue-white sphere assembled itself from data, rotating slowly in the holographic field at the center of the bridge. Sorathe knew this planet. Every Ven officer knew it, in the way that every officer knows the footnotes of old operational files. 30,000 years ago, the deep survey vessel Caliph San had crashed on this world during a routine biological census. The planet had been classified as a Category 2 biosphere. Complex life, no meaningful intelligence. The dominant land species at the time had been a type of upright primate. Fur, flat teeth. Cognitive rating of 0.4 on the Ascendancy Sentience Index, which placed them somewhere between a clever bird and a slow fungus. They had been painting animals on cave walls with their fingers. They had not yet figured out fire. The retrieval of the Caliph San had been filed as low-priority salvage. The paperwork had moved through the Ascendancy's bureaucratic system at the speed bureaucratic systems preferred, which was no speed at all. 30,000 years later, the paperwork had finally been processed, and Sorathe, whose career had been quietly shelved after a political disagreement with the Admiralty, had been given 12 warships and told to go pick up the pieces. A retirement errand, a nothing mission. She stared at the planet on the display. The daylight side was ordinary. Oceans, continents, cloud patterns. The continents were in roughly the same positions as the old survey maps, shifted by tectonic drift, but recognizable. Nothing alarming. Then the display rotated to the night side. Light. Not fire. Not bioluminescence. Not volcanic glow. This was organized, patterned. It spread across the dark continents in vast networks. Lines and clusters and blazing concentrations that followed coastlines, river valleys, and mountain passes. Thousands of nodes. Tens of thousands. Connected by filaments of light that pulsed with a rhythm that was unmistakably, impossibly artificial. Cities. Sorath did not move. Her forelimbs locked against her thorax, in a posture her crew had never seen. It was an old Ven reflex, something from before they were civilized. A prey response. The body saying, "Do not be noticed." Quillen. "I see it, Commander." The cognitive rating of the dominant species at time of the Caliph San incident. Confirm. Quillen pulled the file. 0.4. Pre-linguistic, pre-tool use, pre-fire. Run a current reading, cognitive radiation signature from the surface. Quillen's instruments hummed. 12 warships hung in the dark at the edge of a star system that should have been empty and dead, and every officer on every ship was watching their own sensor feeds and arriving at the same conclusion at the same speed, like dominoes falling in formation. The number came back. Quillen read it again, ran the calibration sequence, read it a third time. 9.7, she said. No one spoke. The Ven Ascendancy, the oldest coalition of intelligent species in the known galaxy, builders of fold space drives and architects of a civilization that spanned 11,000 star systems, rated themselves at 8.2. The primates who had been painting bison on cave walls 30,000 years ago now registered at 9.7. Sorathi's tactical officer, a grizzled Ven named Dorith, who had fought in 3 border wars and once held a collapsing space station together with his bare limbs, made a sound. A low, involuntary hum from deep in his thorax. Among the Ven, this was the equivalent of a seasoned soldier looking at an incoming army and saying, very quietly, "We should leave." "Commander," Quillen said. Her voice had changed. The excitement was gone. "The structure in the outer system. I have completed my scan." "What is it?" "A shipyard. They are building interstellar vessels. The engineering is functional. Based on their current construction rate, they will be capable of fold space travel within 30 to 50 years. Sorathe looked at the planet, the beautiful, screaming, impossible planet. She thought about the old survey data, the little primates with their flat teeth and their painted walls. She thought about what 9.7 meant on a cognitive scale that the Ascendancy had designed specifically because they believed no species would ever need the upper range. She thought about the fact that her 12 warships were the only Ven presence within 4,000 light-years. "Wake the Admiralty," she said. Dorath turned. "Commander, the time delayed to Ascendancy Central is—" "All of them, Dorath. Emergency cipher. Highest priority. Wake every admiral in the network." "What shall I tell them?" Sorath looked at the night side of the planet one more time. All that light, all that noise, 30,000 years of noise, compressed into a roar that filled every frequency the Ven had ever learned to listen on. "Tell them," she said, "that the salvage operation is cancelled. Tell them we have a problem." She paused. "Tell them the primates are awake." Quillen had studied 43 species in her career. She had mapped the cognitive development of silicon-based hive minds on Vorath. She had documented the slow, beautiful mathematics of the gas giant intelligences that thought in pressure waves and took 11 years to complete a single sentence. She had once spent 2 decades cataloging the death poetry of the Selith, a species that had achieved sentience, invented philosophy, and gone extinct within the span of a single geological heartbeat. None of it prepared her for the internet. "I need the monitoring team rotated every 30 minutes, she told Sorathe on the second day. "Analyst Vorin has been sedated. He was exposed to human broadcast streams for 40 consecutive minutes and began exhibiting signs of cognitive fragmentation." Sorathe's forelimbs crossed. "From hostile content?" "No. From volume." 40 minutes of unfiltered human communication nearly broke him. They produce more data in a single day than the Selith produced in their entire existence as a species. And most of it is— Quillen paused, searching for the right word. "Arguing. They argue constantly. About everything. They argue about the composition of their food. They argue about the movement of their bodies for exercise. They argue about which arrangement of sounds constitutes superior music. They have at this moment 412 simultaneous global arguments occurring about the correct temperature at which to prepare a single beverage made from roasted seeds. Is any of it relevant to our mission?" "All of it is relevant, Commander. That is the problem. They do not separate knowledge from noise. They throw everything into the same stream, and let it collide. And somehow, I cannot yet explain how, functional innovation emerges from the collision. Quillen spent the next 3 days mapping human civilization from orbit. She worked methodically, the way she had been trained, building a picture layer by layer. Geography first, then infrastructure, then technology, then culture. Each layer was worse than the last. Geography, they had altered it. Rivers redirected, mountains tunneled through, coastlines reshaped. One nation had built an island that did not exist in nature and put a city on it. Infrastructure. The planet's surface was connected by a web of transportation networks so dense that Quillen's mapping software initially classified it as a single organism. Roads, rails, undersea cables, aircraft filled the sky in patterns that resembled swarming insects. And beneath the surface, tunnels, everywhere. They had burrowed into their own planet, the way the Ven burrowed into asteroids, except the Ven did it for mining, and the humans appeared to do it because they simply could not stop building. Technology. This was where Quillen's training began to fail her. She could identify the principles. Electromagnetic manipulation, nuclear energy, quantum computation in its early stages, biological engineering, orbital manufacturing. What she could not identify was the path. The technological tree made no sense. They had developed nuclear weapons before they developed nuclear medicine. They had put machines on other planets before they had solved basic diseases on their own. They had invented global communication networks and then used them primarily to share images of small domestic animals. Their development path is irrational, Quillen reported to Sorathi. No species in the Ascendancy Archive follows this pattern. They do not build from foundation to application. They build whatever captures their attention, and then find applications afterward. It is like watching someone construct a house by starting with the roof. And yet the house stands, Sorath said. And yet the house stands. On the 4th day, Quillen found the ship. Or rather, she found where the ship was not. The Khalid had crashed in a river delta in the northern hemisphere, in a region the humans now called northern Iraq. The old coordinates were precise. Quillen scanned the location with instruments that could detect Ven alloy through a kilometer of solid rock. Nothing. She widened the scan. Nothing. She ran a global sweep for Ven alloy signatures. The results came back scattered. Fragments of the Khalid were spread across the planet, small pieces in dozens of locations. She cross-referenced the locations with human surface data, museums, laboratories, government buildings, military installations, underground vaults. The humans had found the ship. They had taken it apart. They had distributed the pieces across their entire civilization, like a body divided among churches, each fragment held and studied and guarded. Quillen sat with this information for a long time. Then she pulled the human technological timeline and laid it beside the Ven alloy distribution map. For 25,000 years after the crash, the trajectory was flat. Stone, bronze, iron, slow, expected. A species climbing the ladder rung by rung. Then, roughly 500 years ago, the curve bent. It did not just accelerate, it went vertical. Physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics, medicine, each field spiking in a pattern that Quillen had seen before, in the Ascendancy's own records of species that had received external technological contact. The spike was not natural. It was triggered. The Caliph Zone had carried a standard Ven knowledge core, a compressed archive of Ascendancy science, history, and engineering, intended for the ship's crew to reference during long surveys. When the ship crashed, the core would have remained intact. It was designed to survive anything. 30,000 years ago, a group of primates who had not yet invented language had found in their river delta an object that contained the collected knowledge of a galactic civilization. It had taken them 25,000 years to open it. It had taken them 500 years to change the world. Quillen presented her findings to Soroth in the commander's private quarters. She spoke for 11 minutes. Soroth did not interrupt. They decoded the knowledge core, Quillen said. Not all of it. Based on their current technological level, I estimate they have successfully decoded approximately 12%. Their so-called scientific revolution, the explosion of knowledge that began roughly 5 centuries ago, was not a natural development. It was a response to our technology. They found our answers and worked backward to discover the questions. 12%, Soroth said. 12%, and with that fraction, they have colonized neighboring planets, split the atom, decoded their own genetics, built global communication networks, and are currently constructing interstellar-capable vessels in their outer system. Soroth was quiet. In the silence, Quillen could hear the hum of the flagship's engines, a sound so constant that she normally forgot it existed. What is in the remaining 88%? Soroth asked. Quillen had prepared for this question. She had hoped Soroth would not ask it. Advanced fold space mechanics, gravity manipulation at the stellar scale. Theoretical frameworks for the direct conversion of matter to energy and energy to matter. Dark state engineering, and, she hesitated, theoretical models that the Ascendancy classified as forbidden research, causal manipulation, temporal interference, technologies we decided were too dangerous to pursue. And these are in the undecoded portion. Yes, so the humans have not yet found them. Not yet. Soroth stood. She moved to the viewport and looked out at the star system. From this distance, the third planet was just a blue dot. A small, bright, screaming dot. How long? She asked. At their current rate of decryption, how long until they reach the forbidden sections? Quillen had run the calculation 7 times. Each time, the answer was the same. At their current rate, which is accelerating, between 60 and 100 years. And if they decode those sections, if they build what is described there, then they will be capable of things that the Ascendancy is not. Things that the Ascendancy specifically chose not to be capable of. Because we understood the danger. And you believe the humans will make the same choice? To stop? Quillen thought about the internet. The arguments. The nuclear weapons built before nuclear medicine. The images of small domestic animals shared on networks that could coordinate a global war. The species that had looked at the atom and split it open just to see what would happen. No, she said. I do not believe they will stop. Sorothy's mandibles clicked. Twice. Dr. Nkechi Okafor had known about the fleet for 3 days before the Ven thought they were being stealthy. She sat in her office at SETI Advance Headquarters in Geneva, watching 12 alien warships creep toward Earth's orbit on a screen that showed them as neat red triangles against the black. The tracking data came from a network of deep space sensors that no government officially admitted existed, operated by an organization that no government officially admitted funding, the Cradle Commission. Founded in 1952, when a team of researchers working in the Iraqi desert had confirmed that the object buried in the dried river delta was not from Earth, not from this solar system, not from any engineering tradition that any human mind had ever conceived. The commission had operated in silence for over 70 years, overseeing the study of the crashed vessel, managing the slow decryption of its knowledge core, and above all, preparing for the day when someone came looking for it. That day was today. Nkechi picked up her phone and called the commission's chair, a quiet Norwegian man named Lindqvist, who had the calm energy of someone who had been expecting bad news for his entire career. They're here, she said. How many ships? 12. A pause. Military? Based on their energy profiles and structural configurations, yes. Warships. Big ones. How big? Nikechi looked at the data. The largest is approximately 4 kilometers long. Another pause. Longer. Proceed with Contact Protocol 7, Lindqvist said. You are authorized to make first approach. Buy us time. How much time? As much as you can. The first meeting took place aboard the Ven flagship, in a chamber that the aliens had prepared with obvious care and terrible accuracy. The temperature had been dropped to near freezing. The air smelled like wet animal hide and something organic that Nkechi's aide, a young Brazilian linguist named Costa, identified as mammoth dung after cross-referencing with paleobiological databases on his tablet. They pulled their environmental data from 30,000 years ago, Costa whispered, as the human delegation, 6 people in cold weather gear they had grabbed at the last minute, walked through the entrance corridor. They think we still live in the Ice Age. They're being considerate, Nkechi said through numb lips. Smile, everyone smile. The Ven were larger than the briefing files had suggested. Commander Sorath stood at the center of the chamber, 8 limbs arranged in a formal posture, her chitinous body reflecting the blue-white light of the overhead panels. She was perhaps 3 meters tall. Her head was a broad, angular structure, dominated by compound eyes that tracked each human independently. Her mandibles, 4 of them, layered, moved in small patterns that the translation system flagged as emotional indicators, but could not yet decode. Beside her stood the science officer, Quillen, smaller and visibly more animated. Her forelimbs kept shifting position, and her mandibles clicked in rapid sequences that the translator rendered as, Nikechi noted with private amusement, the Ven equivalent of nervous fidgeting. The 6 humans looked, by comparison, like children who had wandered into a cathedral built for giants. Sorath spoke first. The translation system converted her speech into English with a slight delay, rendering her words in a flat, neutral tone that stripped away whatever emotional texture the original language carried. We are the Ven Ascendancy. We come to retrieve what is ours. The vessel designated Caliph Zone, which was lost on this world 30,000 of your orbital cycles ago. We request the return of the vessel and all materials derived from it. We intend no hostility. We wish only to recover our property and depart. Nikechi nodded. She had rehearsed this moment for 20 years, not the words, the pace, the rhythm of delay. Every hour she kept the Ven talking was an hour gained. Thank you, Commander Sorathi. On behalf of the people of Earth, I welcome you. Your request is noted and will be given serious consideration. However, given the significance of this moment, the first confirmed contact between our species, we believe it would be appropriate to establish a formal framework for discussion. I propose a joint commission with representatives from both. The vessel, Sorath said, is it intact? Nikechi paused, recalibrated. The vessel has been the subject of extensive study over many years. Its current status is complex and would require detailed documentation to. You disassembled it. The chamber went quiet. Nikechi met Sorath's compound eyes. Hundreds of lenses, each one reflecting a tiny image of Nikechi's face. We studied it, Nikechi said. Yes. And the knowledge core. That too. Sorath's mandibles moved in a pattern the translator could not read. Then, she asked a question that was not in any diplomatic script, not in any protocol, not in any file that Nikechi had spent 20 years preparing. Your species, Sorath said. When we last surveyed this world, you were pre-linguistic, pre-fire. You had a cognitive rating of 0.4. You are now registering at 9.7. Is this because of our ship? Every member of Nikechi's delegation held their breath. No, Nikechi said. She said it the way a person says something that is technically true, but deliberately incomplete. She said it knowing that Sorath would hear the lie. She said it knowing that the lie itself was the message. Sorath's mandibles clicked once. That small, dry sound that Nikechi had already learned meant the Van equivalent of a very long, very tired sigh. Your development curve matches the signature of externally accelerated species, Sorat said. The correlation between your technological timeline and the contents of the knowledge core is exact. You are claiming this is a coincidence? I am claiming, Nikechi said, choosing each word like she was placing stones on a scale, that your ship gave us pieces, some physics, some metallurgy, a head start on questions we would have asked eventually. But the thing your people left behind, that mattered most, was not the knowledge core. Then what? Nikechi thought about the cave paintings, the little handprints on stone. She thought about the first human who had looked up at the night sky and asked a question that had no practical value, no survival benefit, no evolutionary advantage whatsoever. The question, she said. We looked at that ship and asked, what else is out there? That is not something you can reverse engineer. That was already in us. It was always in us. Your ship did not make us what we are. It just made us faster. Sorat stared at her for a long time. The compound eyes did not blink, but something shifted behind them. Some calculation, some reassessment, that the translator could not capture, and that Nkechi could only feel the way a person feels a change in air pressure before a storm. We will continue this discussion, Sorathe said. I require time to consult with my government. Of course, Nikechi said. As do I. The shuttle ride back to Earth was silent until they broke atmosphere. Costa sat beside Nikechi, his tablet clutched against his chest, his face the particular shade of gray that meant a person had just met an alien species for the first time, and was processing the experience through the only framework available, which was blind, screaming disbelief. How did it go? He asked. Nikechi watched the clouds part below them. Earth spread out beneath the shuttle, green and brown and blue, laced with the lights of cities that had not existed when the Caliph Zone fell from the sky. They want the ship back, she said. And? Nikechi pulled out her secure phone. She typed a single message to Lindqvist. Move up the timetable. Costa leaned over. The timetable for what? Nikechi put the phone away. For making sure, she said, that when they decide whether to ask or to take, they choose to ask. Sorathi read Humanity's War History on the seventh night. She had not intended to. Quillen had compiled the intelligence briefing, and Sorathi had planned to review only the summary, force projections, weapons capabilities, strategic doctrine, the standard assessment she would run on any potentially hostile species, before deciding whether to engage or withdraw. But the summary had a footnote, and the footnote had a link. And the link led to a record so vast, so dense, so impossibly detailed, that Sorathi found herself reading for 6 hours straight, her forelimbs locked against her desk, in the posture her species used for processing information that the mind did not want to accept. They had been fighting since before they could write. Not just fighting, documenting, analyzing, refining. Every war produced new strategies. Every defeat produced new technologies. Every peace was a pause, during which they prepared for the next war with the focused dedication of a species that understood, on some deep and fundamental level, that peace was the exception and violence was the weather. She read about their first global conflict. 10 million dead, poison gas, trenches filled with bodies and mud, a machine gun that could kill hundreds in minutes, invented by a species that had been using swords less than 1,000 years earlier. She read about their second global conflict. 60 million dead, cities burned from the air, a weapon that split the atom and turned 2 cities into shadows and ash, and the species that had built this weapon had looked at the result and said, "Let us build more." She read about the Cold War. This was where she stopped reading. Not because of the weapons. 2 nations, armed with enough nuclear devices to render their planet uninhabitable several times over, had pointed these weapons at each other for 40 years. The doctrine was called mutually assured destruction. Both sides knew that using the weapons meant the end of both sides. Both sides knew that the other side knew this. And both sides kept building more weapons anyway. Sorathe had commanded fleets for 6,000 years. She had studied the military histories of 43 species. She had seen wars fought for territory, for resources, for ideology, for survival. She had never, not once, not in any archive, not in any species record, encountered a civilization that had invented the concept of total self-destruction as a military strategy, and then continued to stockpile the means to achieve it. The Ven had a word for species that developed weapons capable of destroying themselves. The word translated roughly as finished. It was used in the past tense because such species always were. The humans had built the weapons, pointed them at themselves, stared into the void of their own extinction for 4 decades. And then they had simply continued. Built computers, went to their moon, argued about beverages, had children. The weapons still existed. They had just decided to live alongside them, the way a person might live alongside a sleeping predator in their house, stepping over it each morning on the way to make breakfast. Sorathe closed the file. She sat in the dark of her quarters for a long time. Then she called her tactical officer. Dorath, run a full combat assessment. 12 Ven warships versus current human defensive capability. All scenarios. Dorath was quiet for a moment. Commander, our weapons are significantly more advanced than all scenarios, Dorath, including scenarios in which they do not behave rationally. The assessment came back the next morning. Dorath delivered it in person, which was never a good sign. In a direct engagement, we win, Dorath said. Our shields, weapons, and fold space capability are beyond anything they currently possess. We could neutralize their orbital infrastructure in approximately 4 hours. And then we would need to occupy a planet of 8 billion individuals who have spent their entire species history fighting each other, and who have on multiple occasions chosen self-destruction over surrender. Your recommendation? Dorath's thorax hummed, that low, involuntary sound. My recommendation, Commander, is that we do not fight a species that invented mutually assured destruction for fun. 3 days later, Quillen detected the energy spike. It came from the outer system, from the shipyard that humans had built beyond the ice belt. Construction activity, which had already been high, had tripled in 72 hours. New structures were being assembled at a rate that suggested either a massive increase in workforce or a breakthrough in automated manufacturing. What are they building? Sorath asked. Quillen ran the scans 4 times before answering. It is not a ship, she said. The structure does not match any vessel configuration in our databases. It is a single object, approximately 200 meters in length. Its energy signature is, she paused, ran the scan a 5th time. Its energy signature does not match anything in our databases either. Weapons platform? Unknown. The energy readings suggest a power source operating on principles I cannot identify. The closest analog in Ven science is a theoretical framework from Section 7 of the Forbidden Research Archive. Sorath felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She was not sure what to call it. It was cold, and it lived in the space between her 2nd and 3rd hearts, and it made her forelimbs want to fold inward. They have not decoded that section, she said. Quillen confirmed. They have decoded only 12% of the core. 12% of the core as it was designed, Quillen said carefully. It is possible that the humans did not decode the forbidden sections directly. It is possible they arrived at similar conclusions independently. Independently. They have a history of this. They developed nuclear fission before they understood nuclear fusion. They built flying machines before they fully understood aerodynamics. They reach conclusions through methods that do not follow standard cognitive paths. They guess, they experiment, they fail and try again. They are not systematic. They are lateral, Sorathi said. Yes, Sorathi ordered a focus scan of the object. Her weapons officer, a meticulous Ven named Sathan, who had spent 3 centuries designing shield systems, analyzed the results with the calm precision of a surgeon examining a tumor. Commander, Sathan said, this device operates on a principle of localized space-time collapse. If activated, it would create a causal loop within a defined radius. Anything inside the loop would be retroactively erased from the timeline. Not destroyed, erased, as if it had never existed. The bridge was silent. The Ascendancy classified this technology as forbidden 12,000 years ago, Sathan continued. Our physicists determined it was theoretically possible, but practically suicidal. The energy requirements alone would... They solved the energy problem, Quillen said quietly. She had been running her own analysis. The power source is a zero-point extraction system. Also not in our databases. They built it themselves. Sorathe looked at the display, the little blue dot. 8 billion primates who painted on cave walls, and split atoms, and fought each other without ceasing, and built a weapon that could erase pieces of reality, because someone had left a textbook in their nursery. And they had not only read the textbook, but finished it, and then written their own chapters in the margins. She thought about Doroth's assessment. We would win the battle. We would not survive the occupation. She thought about Sathan's analysis. A weapon that makes things never have existed. She thought about the Cold War. A species that had stared into its own extinction and then gone to the moon. Sorathe opened a communication channel. Not to the Admiralty. Not to her fleet. To Earth. Dr. Okafor, she said. I believe we have been miscategorizing your species. Then Nkechi's voice, calm and measured, and carrying the particular weight of a person who had been waiting for this call. Yes, Nkechi said. You have. I would like to meet again. On your world this time. I think that would be wise. Sorathe closed the channel. She sat alone on her bridge, in the dark, in the silence between stars, and she thought about teeth. Every species in the Ascendancy had evolved past the need for teeth. The Ven had shed theirs 900,000 years ago. Teeth were primitive, aggressive, a relic of competition and scarcity. Humans still had theirs, and they had built new ones. Quillen had never walked on a planet's surface without an environmental suit. The Ven were a spacefaring species, had been for longer than most stars in this region of the galaxy had existed. Their bodies were built for controlled environments, filtered air, regulated temperature, measured light. A planet's surface was chaos, unfiltered radiation, unpredictable wind, organic particles floating in the atmosphere, entering the respiratory system without permission. She stepped off the shuttle, and the wind hit her like a living thing. It smelled. Everything smelled. The air was thick with 1,000 competing chemical signatures. Plant matter, combustion residue, water vapor, soil bacteria, animal protein, and something sweet and sharp that Quillen's sensors identified as flowering vegetation. Her mandibles flared involuntarily, overwhelmed by input. Nkechi was waiting on the landing pad, with a small security detail and no weapons visible. She wore a dark coat against the morning cold, and watched the Ven delegation descend the ramp with the expression of someone who had spent 20 years preparing for a moment and was now discovering that preparation and readiness were not the same thing. Sorathe came first, then Quillen, then 2 Ven guards who looked at the open sky with the deep unease of creatures who preferred ceilings. Welcome to Earth, Nkechi said. The facility was called the Cradle Museum. It was built into the ground, a vast underground complex beneath the dried riverbed in northern Iraq. where the Caliph zone had crashed 30,000 years ago. The surface entrance was modest, a concrete building, guard posts, fences, the kind of facility that looked from the outside like it might house water treatment equipment or electrical infrastructure. Beneath the surface, it was a cathedral. The Caliph zone had been reassembled. Not restored. It was far too damaged for that, but laid out in a vast chamber, each component separated and mounted and labeled. The ship's skeleton stretched across the underground hall like the bones of some ancient leviathan, lit from below by soft white light. Every fragment had a designation. Every decoded page of the knowledge core was displayed on panels alongside the human breakthrough it had inspired. Sarathe walked through the chamber in silence. Her 8 limbs moved slowly, carrying her past the remains of a ship that had left Ven space 30,000 years ago and landed in a world of cave painters and mammoth hunters. She stopped at each display, read each label. Her mandibles were still. Quillen followed, but she was not looking at the ship. She was looking at the humans. There were scientists here, dozens of them. They had been gathered for the occasion. Physicists, engineers, biologists, linguists, each one representing a field that had been transformed by the knowledge core's contents. They watched the Ven with expressions that mixed awe and nervousness, and something else. Something Quillen recognized because she felt it herself. Hunger. The desire to ask questions, to compare, to learn. A physicist named Yamamoto approached Quillen first. He was short by human standards, with gray hair and glasses that he kept pushing up his nose with one finger. He carried a tablet loaded with equations. "Your fold space drive," he said, skipping every social protocol his colleagues had probably briefed him on. The equations in the core describe a method of spatial compression that requires a negative energy density. We solved it using a modified Casimir framework, but our solution introduces a resonance instability at distances greater than 40 light-years. How did you solve the resonance problem? Quillen stared at him. "You solved the negative energy density requirement," she said, "with a modified Casimir framework. It's inelegant. It works, but it's brute force. We assumed you had something better. We do, but our solution took 1100 years to develop." "How long have you had the framework?" "The Casimir equivalent? Approximately 14,000 years. Yamamoto nodded as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "We've had it for 60. He said it without pride. Just a fact, like reporting the weather. Quillen felt something shift inside her, a gear turning, a door opening into a room she had not known existed in her own mind. She began talking to Yamamoto, then to a biologist named Chowdhury, who showed her a medical technique derived from page 2341 of the Knowledge Core, a method for reversing cellular degradation. The Ven had been working on this problem for 10,000 years. The humans had solved it in 40, using a combination of the core's theoretical framework and a biological insight drawn from the regenerative properties of a small aquatic creature called an axolotl. "You used an animal," Quillen said. "The axolotl regrows its own limbs," Chowdhury said. "Your core described the physics of cellular repair. We asked, who is already doing this? Nature had solved it before we did. We just borrowed the method and scaled it up." "That is not how," Quillen stopped. "That is not how the Ascendancy approaches problem solving." "How does the Ascendancy approach it?" "From first principles. Theory, then application. We would never think to look at a small water creature for the answer to a physics problem. That's why it took you 10,000 years. In a smaller room off the main chamber, a group of human engineers showed Quillen a piece of hull alloy from the Caliph zone. Beside it, mounted on the same display shelf, was a piece of human-manufactured alloy based on the same molecular structure. The human version was lighter, stronger, more flexible. The crystal alignment was different. Not wrong exactly, but reorganized in a pattern that Quillen's materials training told her should not work. "How does this hold together?" she asked. "The crystal structure is asymmetric. It should shear under stress." "It does shear," the lead engineer said. "Then it reforms. The asymmetry is the point. It fails and recovers faster than a symmetric structure resists. We got the idea from how bones heal." Quillen touched the display glass. Her forelimb left a faint print. "You improved it," she said. "We adapted it." "That is the same thing." The engineer shook her head. "No. Improvement means making the same thing better. Adaptation means making a different thing that works in a different way for a different reason. We didn't improve your alloy. We asked your alloy a question it had never been asked." Quillen found Sorathi in the main chamber, standing before the reassembled heart of the Caliph's zone. The knowledge core housing, now empty, its contents long since extracted and spread across human civilization like seeds. "They did not just learn from us," Quillen said. She spoke quietly, aware that her words carried a weight she was only beginning to understand. "They learn differently. Their pattern recognition is lateral. They make connections between things that have no logical relationship and extract function from the collision. It is not how intelligence is supposed to work." Sorath looked at the empty core housing, and yet, they stood together in silence, two members of a civilization that had traveled the stars for longer than the humans' recorded history. Standing in an underground room on a small blue planet, looking at the skeleton of a ship that had fallen from the sky and been reborn as something its builders never imagined. Sorath made her decision. She did not announce it, did not discuss it with Quillen or Dorath or the Admiralty. She simply opened her communication device and filed her report. One sentence. The sentence that would determine whether the Ven Ascendancy sent an armada or an embassy. "The ship is not lost. It has been inherited. I recommend we introduce ourselves to our successors." She closed the device and walked toward the exit, where Nikechi was waiting. The two of them, the Ven commander and the human diplomat, exchanged no words. Nikechi looked at Sorathi's face, at the configuration of her mandibles, at the set of her forelimbs. She could not read Ven body language, but she could read the absence of aggression the way any animal can, across any species, across any distance. Sorathi inclined her head, a gesture she had seen the humans use. She did not know exactly what it meant. She did it anyway. Nikechi inclined hers back. Quillen was the last to leave the museum. She climbed the stairs to the surface and stepped out into sunlight so bright it made her optical sensors contract to pinpoints. The Iraqi landscape spread around her, dry, vast, ancient. The river that had once flowed here was gone. The glaciers that had once covered the northern lands were gone. The primates who had painted on cave walls were gone. In their place stood something the galaxy had never seen before. In the courtyard outside the museum entrance, a child was playing. A girl, perhaps 6 years old, dark-haired, chasing a small drone toy that hovered and darted above her head. The drone projected light patterns as it moved, flickering sequences that Quillen recognized, with a start that made her forelimbs lock. Ven navigational code, the light pulse language used by ascendancy ships to communicate in fold space, repurposed, simplified, and turned into a toy, a game, a child's plaything. The girl noticed Quillen. She stopped running. The drone hovered above her, still pulsing its stolen starlight. She looked up at the alien, 8-limbed, chitinous, 3 times her height, a representative of a civilization older than her species' oldest memory, and she waved. A small hand, fingers spread. Quillen looked at that hand. She thought about the handprints on the cave walls. 30,000 years ago, a primate had pressed its palm against stone and left a mark that said, "I was here." Now a child was waving that same hand at a visitor from the stars, and the gesture said something different. It said, "We're coming." Quillen raised one forelimb. She was not built for waving. The motion was awkward, angular, wrong. She waved anyway. The child laughed. A bright, clear, fearless sound that rang across the courtyard and faded into the dry wind and the ancient dust and the wide, patient sky. Quillen stood in the sunlight and listened to it go.